Okay, Nigel, it's fantastic to have you on our Side Hustles and Startups podcast. Thank you so much for agreeing to come onto it today.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for the invite. Thank you.
No problem. So what would be really good for our listeners and viewers, Nigel, would be excellent if you wouldn't mind maybe just sharing with everyone a little bit about your background, who you are, what business you're operating at the moment. I don't know anything about what you do. It's the first time we've actually met. So it's going to be nice again for our listeners and our viewers to actually get to meet you at the same time I do. So yeah, can't wait to hear your story. So over to you.
Okay. Well, my name's Nigel, and I'm a commercial drone pilot. And I came across the opportunity a few years ago through a franchise to fly a drone and earn money at the same time. I thought, well, what couldn't be better than that? You know, I mean, it's every boy's dream, surely, to play with toys and get paid for it. However, as things turned out, it wasn't quite as straightforward as that. It wasn't as simple as that. You obviously have to go through a week's test to get the license. So you have to prove that you are who you say you are, and you're competent to do it, and with a fair degree of responsibility as well. It's not just a case of rock up, send the drone up and do what you like. It's not like, not commercially anyway. So you have to apply for a license through the Civil Aviation Authority, of which you have to reapply for every 12 months. You have to produce an operational manual, which is an enormous document that proves you are what you say you are. You know what you're talking about. You understand the legislation, everything that goes with it. And that's changing constantly. So every 12 months, that has to be reviewed. You have to pay for that privilege to have that document sent off to the Civil Aviation Authority, and for them to check it over and make sure that it's all correct and you do understand what you're doing. And then they will resend you the license. And like I say, you have to do that every 12 months. But since then, I mean, to be honest, though, it's been a slow build. I've been doing it since end of 2017. I took it on in the August, and between August and Christmas, I got one job, and I thought it's the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. However, through going to network meetings and talking to different people and basically using up a lot of shoe leather, the business has started to slowly build. It's not to the point where I'd like it to be. Obviously, I'm happy to take on more work all the time, of course, but it is slowly building. It is becoming a viable business. It's taken a lot longer than I would have liked. My wife always tells me that I want things to happen yesterday, and I admit that I do. But it has started to build, and I've now got repeat business. You know, people are happy with the work that I do, with the quality and the content that I put in, and yeah, people come back to me and keep on coming back to me. So obviously, I'd like a lot more than that of that. But we'll keep on, and hence getting involved with Beth and at the Keele University, you know, so to build the business.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And that's, of course, how we met. Bethan is working at Rocketeer as well on our social media and digital marketing program. So it's great to be working with her, and nice that she connected us together. And actually, you just touched on that point about networking and connections, and you got your first job. And then that built on, and you got more people and more connections. How would you say, because you also alluded to the fact that you did some work for people and then that led to more work. How do you approach the projects that you're doing? Are you thinking about that project on its own at the time? And then once you've finished it, you know, are you then thinking about, can you work with them again? What's your approach to working with different clients?
Well, I've always, it might sound a bit overconfident, but I've also always believed in myself that if somebody else can do it, then I can do it. And so I don't think, and never think this is impossible to do. So I always approach everything with an open mind. You know, I get to meet these clients and they'll say basically what they want. And before I know it, I'll say, yeah, I can do that, no problem. Yeah. And then find out later how I can go about doing that. But I always approach everybody with the same professionalism. They're paying for a service at the end of the day, and they want the best they can get out of it. And to be honest, they probably want it for nothing, but they still want the best. So I always approach everything professionally and with an open mind every time. But each project is new, and most times it's new in itself, you know. So I can't say that this is the way I do this will automatically apply to this. It's got to be a fresh mind every time. Okay, there are things like building sites that I go back to time and time again, and I can use the same approach every time. I know what these people want and how I'm going to fly the drone and what images I'm going to capture and how I'm going to put that together. I know that, but then something will come along, like recently I did a job for a company that does landscaping for large housing estates, and it's wildflower meadows and trees, and I thought, I can't, before I go to the site, I can't say I'm going to do it this way. I can't. That's not possible. But also, I think you'd be a bit too rigid then if you did that. If you said, I'm going to do it, this is how I'm going to do this. You've got to go to site and view the site and not make it up as you go along. But I can't really explain what I mean. You've got to view it with an open mind and just fly the drone, but fly the drone professionally and capture the images that you believe that these people want. I mean, obviously, sit down and have a chat with them first about what they want out of it and the images that they want to portray, and then try and capture that. Obviously,
yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I like the positivity that you've got. You know, when you said that, you know, you always feel if you see someone's done it before, that you can also do it. There's a quote I've heard, and I think it goes something like, if you see it, you can believe it, and if you believe it, you can achieve it. And I think the fact that you've got that positive mindset is very much, I'm very similar to you. It's, I'm very much got a can-do attitude and wanting to see how what I offer and the products and services we offer as a company, trying to see how they can best fit particular clients and how we can provide them great value. So I think as well, I remember hearing about Richard Branson being quite similar, that sometimes he'd go for some conversations and meetings and he'd get offered work or have the opportunity for some contracts. And I think he'd say he'd do it and work out maybe some of the details afterwards. But
absolutely, I've got a tendency to do that. I'll say yes to something, then work out the details later. But yeah, like I say, I've always approached it with open mind. If somebody else can do it, then I'm sure I can. And it's very rarely that's let me down.
Great, great. Well, I think one of the things that I think especially our viewers will find interesting on this podcast is if they can actually see your little workroom that you're in, which when the screen came up, I was fascinated to see all the tech that you've got around you. So would you mind just explain, not so much about the room now, but would you mind just sharing a little bit about, you know, you find someone who needs your services, you connect with them, you contact with them, you arrange to go and see them. Do they give you a brief before you arrive, or do you kind of have many conversations before you actually agree to work, or do you tend to go to locations and then you kind of explore what they need and then offer them pricing, and then you kind of you know, get the contracts when you're there? How does that work?
Well, I get approached by a company, and one of the things I always have to have is the precise location of where they want this to take place. Because as part of the part of being a drone pilot, a commercial drone pilot, you have to do risk assessments, pre-flight surveys, method statements, everything. And because sometimes there could be permissions required to do this. So I'll have a conversation with the client and they'll say, well, it's precisely, it's this location. And then I do my research on that location and find out what's involved, what the place looks like, if it's a building, if it's a field, or what it might be. And I sort of get a sense of what's, you could get all sorts of information from Google, you must know you can. So then, but also they'll give me a brief and say, we want to capture this. This is what we're trying to get across. We want to put it on social media, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'll get a sense of what they're doing. So I can't necessarily go to site every time before the job, because sometimes it could be quite some distance away. I've done jobs in the furthest part of Scotland that I've ever been to in my life. And I've also been and done jobs on the south coast. So you can't, it's not really viable to go to these sites beforehand to do a recce sort of thing. So I do as much research as I possibly can on the internet using Google Maps and all sorts of things. There's also software available that you can check out the flight zones. If there's an airport, if there's some restrictions involved in that particular place, if you fall within the flight restriction zone of an airport, you can find all that out online. But basically, taking the client's brief of what they want, what they want to capture, take a look at the site, and then build it from there. And then obviously, once I get to site, I can then feel, well, okay, I was wrong with this, or I was right with this, and I need to adapt in whatever way necessary. So yeah, it's research beforehand, take the client's brief, hopefully sort of get a plan formulated in my mind, and then go to site and adapt that plan or put that plan into action and trying to get exactly what the client wants. So
do you agree on a price and a contract value and what you're going to do before you go, or do you sometimes go with all of that research that you've done, meet with them, explain what you think you can offer? At what point, because obviously price always comes into conversations at some point, and I imagine that there are other commercial drone pilots offering their services as well and their prices. So how do you deal with that price point issue, which obviously always comes up at some point?
Well, through networking, I've spoken to various photographers and videographers, and I've sort of based it around the prices that they use. So I will give a client a price beforehand, because they need to know what to expect. If the price obviously frightens them, then you know, then they're not. I don't think they're quite open to what is involved. I think they just think some people think it's just a hobby, you know, and you turn up with a drone and you send it up, and what's the problem? And it's not. There's a lot more to it than that. So I think the client has got to be of an open mind and professional enough to realize that there's more to it than just rocking up with a drone. But yeah, based upon what photographers and videographers put their price out, then I use that price. If they want, it's a simpler job if they just want me to capture photographs and hand the photographs over, fine, no problem, do that. That's a set price. If they want video, because you can just fly a drone around and take photographs like a machine gun approach, basically, you take as many photographs as you want and then they pick which ones they want. But if there's a video, you've got to fly the drone in smooth lines, you know, to capture that smoothness, to keep the image moving, although it says video, obviously, but to keep the image moving so the drone is moving. So there's more concentration required, more skill required to capture those images, the video images anyway. And so that would be a little bit added on. If they then want me to do a video, then obviously I'll add price on for the editing. I put a soundtrack to it and any logos or text information, and there's a price to that. And then if it's within the local area, I'm not too worried about the fuel costs. But if it's some distance and there's fuel costs to take, especially nowadays, you know, there's fuel costs to take into account. So that will be a price again. So it's a price is agreed before I go, and you know, generally that's worked out. I don't think there's been any occasion when I've got there and thought I've priced this completely wrong. You know, I've got it really before I go. So yeah, that's the way it's approached every time.
Thank you. That's really interesting to see how you go through that. And again, for you know, people listening and watching, I think it's nice for them to hear you even talk about the things like the costs for fuel, because you know, you could price a job, you could be quite new to working in this way, and you could forget the fuel costs or your bed and breakfast costs, and actually, you know, all your profits gone when you get back. So that attention to detail again, and just being, you know, specific about what service you're offering, and also recognizing the value of what you offer. I didn't realize, not speaking to a commercial drone pilot before, you know, you've already shared with us some of the things you have to do to get licenses and to make sure you're operating within the law. You know, all that's fascinating and not something that I would have been aware of.
This is it, and you've obviously got to take out the public liability insurance and all that sort of thing. So I mean, that's a cost as well. So you've got to take all that into account. It could take a couple of hours to put a risk assessment together. I mean, if it's just a field and there's no airports nearby, it can be fairly straightforward. But if it's next door to Manchester Airport, you've got to apply speak to Manchester Airport, to the air traffic control, get their permission, call them on the day to make so they know you're there, where you are, what time you're going to fly, how high you're going to fly, and when you've landed, you call them up again to say, okay, it's all over. I've done the job, sort of thing. We're safe now. There's a lot more to it than people realise, and for me as well, I've got to stay within the law. You know, the law says this is what you've got to do. I've got to be responsible for what I do, just like anything. You know, so I stay within the law. So somebody approached me, oh, what do you think you're doing? Well, I've got permission. You know, I've spoken to the right people. This is my risk assessment. This is my insurance policy. If you want to look at it, fine. You know, this is my license. So you can't be reproached. It's got to be correct.
Excellent, thank you. What about power lines then? I suppose you have to be careful of those, do you? Or... You
do. Power lines as well, it's not just a case of hitting them, they also give off a massive electromagnetic fields. Right. So you've got to be careful, because obviously the GPS systems on the drone can be affected by that. So you have got to be very careful of overhead power lines. But if you use Ordnance Survey maps on Bing, for instance, it shows you where all the power lines are. So you know beforehand that those are there. Railway lines as well as another issue. You've got to steer clear of railway lines, because again, first of all, you've got the train, and then of course you've got all the overhead lines that go with it. So you've got to stay at a distance from rail networks. If you're flying close to a rail network, you have to get permission from Network Rail before you do it. And sometimes they'll say no. Depends on what it is and where it is, but they have been known to say no. So, but I've done quite a bit of work via somebody else for HS2, surveying land that's been acquired. So I think if you're doing a job for Network Rail, then they'll perhaps say yes. If you're doing a job for somebody else as close to Network Rail, they might say no.
And what about, you've got me thinking actually about weather. So, you know, if you rock up and it's looking like there could be a bit of a storm brewing, or it's raining, and, you know, they've agreed to pay you, you've agreed for your time, what happens in that? Has that cropped up? It has.
You have to download a really good weather app onto your phone. I've got a good one, and it'll give me within minutes of whether it's going to rain or not. Obviously, beforehand, before you go to site, you need to check the weather to make sure it's okay. High winds are a problem. Rain is obviously a problem, because it's not just the case of water getting into the electrics. You get water on the lens, so it ruins the image anyway, so you can't fly. There's just no point. So you've got to really check out the weather before you go. I have made the mistake once of turning up on site and it was absolutely throwing it down with rain and I couldn't fly. And I'm afraid that really, I accept responsibility. That's down to me. It's my responsibility. It was my fault that I didn't check the weather properly. And so it's my responsibility. I can't blame them for that, can I?
No, and it's nice to hear you say that, actually, because I think that's one of the things that I strive to do in my organisation when we're working with clients is the book stops with me, and responsibility lies with me on the success of working with clients. And I think that it's really nice to hear you say that, again, for people listening and watching, that, you know, as a business owner, responsibility is really important. So thanks for sharing that. Something I'd be fascinated to learn a little bit about as well is the actual drones. So I don't know, I've never had a drone, don't use drones, find them quite interesting, but never had the need to use them. So could you give us a very quick whistle stop tour on the drones and kind of what you use and recommend? Or
Right, well, the drone I first started with was a Phantom 4, the Phantom 4 Pro, which is, I mean, you must have seen it, it's the white one with the little legs to it. That's how I started with it. And I've still got that, tucked away in the box here somewhere, still got that. Does some fantastic photographs, some cracking images and video as well. The other drone I've got is a Inspire 1, which you must have seen them, the big ones with the legs that raise up, and that's got a Zenmuse X5 camera on it, which is, again, is a cracking camera. It's as good as any SLR camera you can buy off the shelf. You know, it's brilliant. But the one I use all the time It's called the Mavic 2 Zoom, and it's made by DJI. It's small. People think, well, is that it? But you know, don't judge something. It's not size that matters. We all know that size doesn't matter. It's a cracking piece of kit. It's got 4K images, capture 4K images, and it's got a zoom lens on it as well, so you can zoom in really close. It's ideal for roof surveys and things like that because you don't have to get that close. You can zoom the camera in and pick up some cracking detail, you know, missed broken tiles or whatever, or missing slate or something, without getting too close. And it's a brilliant piece of kit. It really is.
Wow. Could you just remind everyone what that one's called again? The one that
the Mavic 2 Zoom.
Mavic 2.
Mavic 2 Zoom, yeah.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. That's
and like I say, it's only small.
well, the people that like the technology side and people who are maybe into drones will find that really interesting. So thank you for sharing that.
That's right.
Nigel, last 5 or 10 minutes, if you don't mind, and what I'd like to maybe talk about now is the way as an entrepreneur you kind of view your business goals, maybe how you view where you want to get to in the future. It'd be really interesting to get your thoughts on that. And while you're just having to think about that, earlier on in the in this conversation, you alluded to the fact that your wife said you wanted more work and it was taking you a little bit longer than you expected. And I heard a really good quote once that said, we over expect what we can do in 1 year, but we under expect what we can actually achieve in, say, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to kind of think you can do a lot in a year, but actually then the caveat to that, the flip side to that, is there is quite a tremendous amount we can achieve in 5 to 10 years. So yeah, just while you bear that in mind, what are your thoughts on where you get?
My goal is to retire to Bora Bora. That's it. You know, off to the sun and no, I'm only joking. I'd like to. I have worked for people in the past, for companies as a 9-to-5 job, and having worked for myself for quite some years, there's no way I want to go back to a 9-to-5 job. I am my own boss, and I am responsible for my own actions as well. I take full responsibility for this. But I'd like to build the business. I mean, eventually, at the moment, I'm a sole trader. I do this just me. But I'd like to build a business and take on people who share the same interests as me. And I don't want to take on somebody that's just, oh yeah, it's a job, and I'll turn up on a Monday and then blah, 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 and then I'll go home. I want somebody to work with people who are enthusiastic, like Bethan, for instance, who are enthusiastic and are fascinated by what you do. And so I'd like to build a business so I can leave a legacy behind. So if I do retire, I've left this legacy behind. Somebody could take it and run with it. You know, that'd be brilliant to me. That's my goal. Not to earn mega bucks out of it. That's not what it's about. It's building a job and a business that I absolutely thoroughly enjoy, but I get paid for it. I mean, what's better than that? I can't believe how look. I stand there sometimes flying this drone, taking all this fantastic. I can't believe I'm getting paid for this. This is unbelievable. And so that's what I want to leave behind. When I do come to retire, I'm not sure as I'll ever be able to let go. But if I do, I've left this behind and go and enjoy this business, and somebody else can get some fun out of it and earn some money at the same time.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Money's a bonus.
I love the fact that you've just said how excited you get about getting paid, doing something that you're passionate about and you love. And I think, there's a good message in there for people that, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be ups and downs and highs and lows. And that's why you've got to build something that you get excited about, you want to get out of bed to do, because that's one of the secrets is engaging with your passion. And just a quick one on your, if it's okay, Nigel, on your kind of plans for the future. So at the moment, you get paid on a time contractual basis to go and fly your drone. When I'm doing my programs and my one-to-one coaching, I talk to people and explain that is a business model. So a way that you earn money, one particular way you earn your money is you are contracted to go and fly your drone for whatever it is that your client wants. So are you planning to expand that and continue with the same business model? Or are you exploring other kind of verticals or other horizontal services and products that might still be connected to flying drones, but maybe a different way of earning money. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, the problem with drone technology is it's expensive. I would like the drone technology, as we all know, when you read the newspaper, see the news, is growing exponentially. You reckon that the potential for this country in drone technology is phenomenal. I'm talking billions. I mean, the UK is one of the first ones that are going to open a drone highway for delivering goods, whether it be medical supplies or whatever. So the technology is expanding all the time. So what the drones are capable of, again, is growing all the time. But what I've got to be careful of is I don't want to try and be a jack of all trades and master of none. I can't say, oh, I'd like to have a go at that, I'd like to have a go at that. I've got to be practical. I've got to keep my expectations within my limits, if you like. But there are areas that I would like to get into. Surveying, 3D surveying. You can use drones to produce 3D maps that people can use for agriculture, for building construction. You know, you build a virtual model using the images that the drone's taken. The security as well. I've looked into security, however, that's more difficult than I was expecting. Surveying, I've done a job recently for a company, I can't really tell you who they are, but it's looking at sprinkler systems, the sprinkler heads inside factories. Now, to do that, normally this particular factory has got probably 2,000 sprinkler heads. To do that in the normal sense would take a scissor lift, and guy would have to get a scissor lift, go up, take a look, come back down, move it up, which would take months. A drone, it's taken 4 visits, 4 5-hour visits, and for a fraction of the cost. So there's something I'd like to get into. There's another one, similar thing, but lightning conductors. Looking at lightning conductors, you can imagine the normal way of doing that would be scaffolding, ladder, scissor lift, you know, and somebody has got to leave the ground at some point or other to look at these things. Send a drone up. It's a half-an-hour job to send a drone up. I mean,
it's also from a safety perspective, it's reducing risk for, you know, employees to be going into these high-risk situations.
Absolutely, yeah. Nobody leaves the ground, you know. So send the drone. I mean, the drone won't do the job. Obviously, if you find there's a tile missing, then the drone's not going to place it. But
not yet.
not yet, no. But it allows you to pinpoint where the problem is. So nobody's left the ground until they found out where the problem is. Right, okay, now we need to concentrate our efforts there and go and sort that problem out. But the drone has saved them countless hours, a hell of a lot of money, and no, like I say, nobody's left the ground. Safety aspects are you just can't compare. And it's environmentally friendly as well. You know, the cost to take a truckload of scaffolding, for instance, to site, the diesel involved in that, and then to take it all back again. Whereas, okay, I'm still in my van and I'm still producing carbon monoxide, but not to that same extent. So the environmental costs as well, you know, they just don't compare. And I think people are starting to realise just how useful these things are, because the trouble is, in the press you read about, you know, a drone flew around an airport and closed the airport for such a long time, or one was nosing around my bedroom window or something, and you only hear about the negative side of things. The positives are far outweigh that, but we don't hear that. That's not newsworthy, is it?
Not newsworthy, no. And it's really interesting, fascinating to hear you talk about this new area of you know, business and tech that I've not really known much about before. If you wouldn't mind, just would you just expand a little bit on, you just talked about actually drone delivery. Now we hear about this in the States, about Amazon were looking at doing deliveries, and you know, you first read it or hear about it and you think, what, drones delivering? And then you hear about drone taxis delivering people. So where are we on actually delivery then? Do you know if there's any of that going on in the UK? Or
yes, there is. There were during COVID, there were drone deliveries to the Isle of Wight, because obviously if you're trying to get medical supplies across the Isle of Wight, there's a ferry involved or whatever, and they use drones to deliver medical supplies within 30 minutes. So, you know, no other form of transportation or delivery can compare to that. They're now starting, they're going to open a superhighway in the UK where corridors will be set up to allow drones to fly, and they will deliver all sorts of things, probably starting with medical supplies and things like that, but eventually this will grow into Amazon deliveries. The problem is, if you can imagine turning up to the Civil Aviation Authority, I've got a brilliant idea, I'm going to let a drone fly on its own, all by itself, go there and come back. They just say, not a chance. No way can you do that, flying through, you know. It's got to be controlled. The software's got to be in place, the hardware's got to be in place, so it can't go wrong. You can't have some drone flying off of its own accord and crashing wherever. It's got to be really controlled. And they call it an operational safety fence, so that the drone stays in its corridor and it can't go beyond that corridor. It can't go beyond its limits. I mean, going back to what I was saying about staying within the law, when you're flying a drone, you have to stay within what's called visual line of sight. And so I should be able to see that drone at all times. Sometimes it's difficult. It's a white drone against a cloudy background. It's difficult to see. But I can't go any higher than 400 foot. And I can't go beyond 500 meters from where I'm standing, a radius of 500 meters. You have to stay within those boundaries. So people that say, oh, I flew my drone, flew for miles and miles, you know, that's just ridiculous. You don't know what's up there. You have no idea what's up there. So to send that into, you know, uncharted space is just absolutely crazy. You've got to.
It's quite irresponsible, isn't it? Yeah.
It is very irresponsible.
Right, Nigel. Well, it's been fascinating meeting and talking to you. My last question that I like to ask people that agree to be on the podcast is, if you could go back to maybe when you were employed before, and you were to talk to yourself before you actually got started and give yourself some tips and ideas to kind of help you work through those early stages and get to where you are now, where your business is becoming more established, you've got a client base, the contracts are coming in, the opportunities are becoming clearer. You know, what would you say to yourself when you first started to help?
I would say don't pack it all in and just concentrate on the drone buzz. I would say get yourself a part-time job and run it alongside. Don't put all your eggs into one basket. But having said that, I thought about this when drones first came about. I said to me, why, there's a business to be had here. I'm sure there's a business, and I missed that opportunity. I wished I'd got in on the ground level. You know, these drones were out there, what we're talking 10 years ago, perhaps, maybe. And I wished I'd gone into it then. So yes, don't put all your eggs into one basket. Be patient. Bear with it. There is a business to be had, but be patient. Bear with it. Don't think I'm gonna, you know, build Rome overnight, because you're not.
No, that's really interesting. Thanks, because I mean, the title of our podcast is Side Hustles and Startups, and one of the things that you know, I like to get people to consider and think about is, you know, at what point does your side hustle become more than a side hustle? So it's nice to hear you, you know, talk about the fact that you could be working either a part-time job, a full-time job, develop your interests, your business ideas, and then start to expand and explore that business model that I mentioned earlier. See where the costs are, see where the profits are. And then you've talked about, yes, it might have been a while now that drones have been available. You know, you say 8, 10 years or so ago. But however, you've also alluded to the growth opportunity, this change in technology, these new corridors opening up. So it's aligning that opportunity of the future and seeing where you can find a business model to kind of ride as a wave of opportunity really into the future, isn't it?
It is, yeah. You know, like thinking about it a few years ago, one of the problems is that, well, the problems I found is that to get customers, you need something to say to, oh, I've done this job before, so I know he's good. But if you've never done a job, you can't get that reputation. How do you get the jobs without the reputation? How do you get the reputation without the job? So that's this snowball that you've got to start and build yourself.
So how did you get over that then?
Look, I think.
Look, I tell you what as well, though, there's also the thought of the fact that you've always got something to bring to the table. So, you know, when you first got your certification and passed the qualifications, And then, of course, what you could then be doing is offering some of your services to try and test it now that you are qualified. And then, of course, quite quickly, you've got some testimonials and you've got some examples. Because I have the same issue where, you know, I've developed our coaching program, helping people build their businesses. But when I first started doing the coaching, it was what gave me the right to think that I could help someone move their ideas forward. So, yeah, I certainly feel your pain at the beginning, but there's a way around it if you've got the passion and the drive and the vision.
Absolutely. Naively, I thought, build a website, they will come. That doesn't happen. That really doesn't happen. You've got to knock on some doors. You've got to wear some shoe leather down. You've got to do some talking and talk to people, convince people of your passion and how you're going to do it and how you're going to go about it, and slowly but surely build on that. But it won't happen overnight.
And actually, to wrap this up and to bring it full circle back to Beth, who actually connected us, the other thing to add to that, of course, is, you know, in today's world, it's a digital world. We live in a media world where there's content everywhere. I mean, obviously, you've even been talking about the content that you create for your customers and your clients, which is the aerial content. And so, you know, that's another thing that needs to be plugged in. And I think that some people who are running businesses, especially those that are running their own business and they're small teams, it can be a challenge to understand how to create the right content, put it into the right message for the right clients, and to reach your audience so that you can show them the value you can offer, and to wrap that up in a connected system that, you know, brings together landing pages, emails, websites. And that's something that we're developing as an organization to help people and better understand. So I think if we connect that to the, like you just said, the networking, you know, the feet on the ground, asking for testimonials and referrals, it's old style guerrilla marketing kind of linked in with the new style digital. And it's an important thing to remember.
It is, yeah. And it's got to be of good quality as well, of course. You know,
Yeah.
You can't peddle rubbish. It's got to be good quality. I remember doing a presentation for a network group, and every so often you're asked to do a 10-minute presentation of what you do. And I produced this video with a really good thumping soundtrack. And they all sat there gobsmacked saying, wow, that's amazing. I thought, well, what did you expect? What did you really expect? You know, it's not some cheapy throwaway camera. It's really good quality stuff. And this is what I offered. So it was that, you know, it's getting out there and getting people to listen.
That's great to finish on that quality. So Nigel, it has been an absolute pleasure to meet you. And it would be great to maybe come back in 6 months' time or 12 months' time and maybe get you on again, and maybe you could share with us how maybe the technology is developing, or any, you know, new clients you've had or new opportunities, and where you see the drone world moving. That'd be it'd be lovely to chat to you again.
I would love to. I'd love to.